All right, back here at the garage, and today we're going to get those 2200cc injectors installed. So I'm going to basically show how I put those in and the process of taking the fuel rail out on my car. And then I'll basically show you guys how I'm setting them up in Megasquirt and getting them idling and running good and everything and getting all the AFRs situated. And I'll show you a little bit about my target AFR map and the autotune VE Analyze software that I'm using with Megasquirt. First step is to take off my intake pipe here. Just a simple T-bolt clamp with a 10mm socket. Just comes out right like that. And then next I'm going to start disconnecting the coil pack harnesses. And then I have one 7mm bolt that actually threads into the head that kind of keeps this held on. I think I need to add a second one here. I was relying on the Schrader valve cap to hold this side down, but it kind of, it's plastic and it doesn't really stay on there that well. So maybe I'll try looking for a metal one. I think a metal one would work pretty well. Like kind of like a metal tire valve kind of valve. So we go ahead and get these disconnected. So these just pop out. And then after that, I need to get a 7/16 socket, and we'll take this bolt out right here. I've been starting to use power tools a little bit more. Usually just for backing bolts out and running them in, not necessarily torquing everything, just because it is a hell of a lot quicker. So here you can see the bolt goes in, and then under it's a little piece of aluminum tube that basically just lets it torque against the head. So since we're not really doing anything too crazy over here, I'm just going to plop these up here for now. And we'll put this bolt over here. No need to take off all the coil plugs and everything. So next step, I'm going to have to drain the harness. So I'm going to release the Schrader valve here and try and get all the fuel out. Next up, I'm going to remove the two fuel rail bolts. There's also two electrical connectors that ground the coils. So I'll make sure to disconnect those and everything. And also I'm going to disconnect the injectors. So before we do anything, I want to make sure that the injectors are in fact working. So I have them plugged into the harness right here, just not into the rail or anything, and no fuel, because I want to make sure that they're all actually turning on and everything. Last time it was 4 and 5 that weren't working. So I got Megasquirt hooked up, and I'm going to go into the CAN bus / test mode, and I'm going to open up Injector Spark. And basically I can enable this test mode. And then what I can do is I can do injector testing down here. I want to test one injector at a time, and I want to test injector A. So if I hit start, you can hear we got injector A was just clicking away. So that's good. So it's going to go A, B, C, D, E, because the firing order is 1, 2, 4, 5, 3. So we know A works. So let's try B. Nice, B is working. Now let's try C, which is going to be injector 4. Nice, she's ticking away. Now let's try injector D. Start. That's cylinder 5, ticking away. And the last one, let's try injector E, which is going to be cylinder 3. Great, so all the injectors are working now. They all seem to be unstuck. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in the fuel rail, and I'll show you guys basically how I use the adapter hats and everything, and the new O-rings I'm putting on the adapter hats. So again, this is a great feature of MS3 Pro, test mode. You can also test spark, so that's how I test my coils to make sure that they're all firing and everything, and I usually do this before, you know, first starts or whatever, so I have the best possible chance of it actually starting up. So let's get these injectors put in. So next step is to remove these 3 Torx screws to remove the retaining bar that holds the injectors in. And then we can put the O-rings on the new O-rings on our top hats on our injectors, and then these top hats are actually slotted, so they have a slot for this injector hold down rail. Another thing to notice, I marked all the injectors. They came in baggies that were numbered, so I marked them just to keep things organized in case I ever want to look back on my flow sheet. Just gonna lubricate the O-rings with a little bit of oil. I don't have any petroleum jelly, unfortunately, but this should work fine. Got the injectors back in, the rail torqued down, all of the wiring connectors snapped into place nicely, and I got the feed and the return hooked back up. So basically now I got Megasquirt hooked back up, and I have test mode, and I'm going to run the fuel pump and just make sure there's no leaks. I already primed the system, and it's holding pressure pretty well. No big leaks down, so let's run the fuel pump and make sure there's nothing leaking. So you can kind of hear the fuel. We're gonna have to lower that fuel pressure to 33 PSI or 2.25 bar for an effective 2000 cc injector. But I don't see any leaks. I don't smell anything. So, yep, maybe a little bit there. Maybe some leftover. So I'm gonna make sure there's no leaks, and then we will set our fuel pressure, and I'll show you guys how that's done using the Seramotive 13129 fuel pressure regulator. So it's been a few minutes and it's only leaking down a couple PSI. That's probably it bleeding out of the regulator, because I don't see, feel, or hear any leaks. So I say we're good. And I've ran these before and they never leaked. I need to replace this, that's disgusting. But anyway, back to the point is, I'm gonna turn the ignition on. We got our ECU on. So we got it primed, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable test mode again, and I'm going to turn the fuel pump on, and we're going to set base fuel pressure. So we want to set the base fuel pressure to 2.25 bar, which is about 33 PSI. So I believe we have to turn this. So as you can see, as I turn this out, fuel pressure actually goes down. So we want to go down quite a bit. So we're going to go down to 30 here. So this is 30. And now we want to go to 32, which is there. And then we want to go halfway in between that. So right about there. It's about 33 pounds. You can see, maybe a little bit less. So you can see it's just about halfway in between. It's just about halfway in between 32 and 34. So that's perfect. Oh, keeps fluctuating a little bit. Let's let it settle out. Right there. That's good enough. It can be a couple PSI off. So I'm gonna leave that, and then I'll show you guys how I set the base fuel in Megasquirt once I get all this back together. And then we can fire it up and see how she idles. Got the OT pipe back on, intake, coil packs, everything's torqued down, ready to go. So we're gonna back this puppy out and show you how I set up the required fuel, and then we'll try starting it. Okay, first step is going to be going to our fuel settings and setting our dead times. Let's make this a little bit bigger. All right, so I already have curve 1 set up for orange injector, so I'm going to leave that and I'm going to use curve 2. And curve 2 is going to be, basically I want to just use a flat 0.45 millisecond dead time, because they don't really give you, these injectors, no one really has a full dead time chart. They just have 0.45 milliseconds at, you know, nominal 14.4, which is pretty much always what the car is going to be running around. So I'm going to leave that at 0.40, oh actually we can leave that at 1 millisecond, and then we're going to make this whole chart equal to 45. So we only want it to be 45% of 1 millisecond, which is going to be 0.45 milliseconds. So we're going to save that, and we also have it set so that the dead time is the same for all injectors. And this way we can preserve the orange dead time in case we ever need to switch back to those for troubleshooting. So now we got a 0.45 millisecond dead time, so we're going to close, and now we want to adjust our required fuel. Next thing I did was set up the required fuel. So our injector flow is going to be 2000 cc at 2.25 bar or 33 psi. That's what we set the regulator to. And our air fuel ratio for E85 is going to be 9.8. That's the stoichiometric. Well, it's actually 9.75 or something, but that's the stoichiometric air fuel ratio for E85. So that'll calculate the correct required fuel of 2.6 milliseconds, and that's 2.6 milliseconds of injection at 100% VE at SAE ambient air conditions, which is like, you know, what's it? I think it's like 70 degrees, 0% moisture, and you know, 1 bar atmosphere. So all that's good. So we are going to burn that, and then we can get her started up here. I'm probably going to need to work on the VE map a little bit, and I'll show you guys how I do that with Tune Analyze Live. So let's just see if it starts. It's probably going to be a little rough. Yeah, it's a little rough, but we'll work on it. So I manually added some fuel in this range just to get the car idling well, and this is Tune Analyze Live, and basically we can hit start auto tune over here, and this will tune our VE map for us. So we just gotta wait for the coolant temperature to reach 160. I think it's at like 155 right now or something. 154 or so. Let it warm up for a couple more minutes. Was playing with Tune Analyze Live, but I forgot that it still needs a lot of work. You can see only this area is good right now, and you can see it's not very linear or smooth. But I figured before I start doing all this fuel tuning, I'm gonna actually fix my axes, both fuel load and RPM, because it doesn't make sense to have the 500 and the 800 when I idle at 12 to 1300. So we're gonna completely change all these and can completely change this to a max fuel load of 400 kPa because I have a 4-bar map sensor. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick, and then I'll show you guys the result. So I went ahead and adjusted my axes. We got RPM down here, 1200 all the way to 10,200. I mean, I'm never gonna be revving to 10,200. I'll probably be revving to 9,9600, but I wanna just have a little bit extra. And then KPA got 30 to 100 for the first 8, and then 140 to 40 for in boost, so that's every 40 KPA. So I'm gonna go out and auto VE tune. This is probably gonna change significantly now that we messed with it so much. And I'm gonna leave ignition. I'm happy with my ignition table right now. So I'm gonna leave this the same for now, and eventually we'll rescale this once fuel's all settled and everything. So I'm gonna go out and do some tuning. So here you can see AutoTune V doing its magic. We're running a 12-8 at idle now, and you can see it is pulling a bunch of fuel to try and get that to a target 14.7. So it's getting there. And then we're basically just going to drive around a bunch and try and tune probably up to like the 4,300-ish range. Something's not right here. Look at this VE map. Look at how high those values are for such low load. I think that this is wrong. I don't think they actually flowed 2,000 cc at 2.25 bar, because if you do the math, that means that they actually flowed 2,400 cc at 3 bar when they're advertised at 2,200 cc. So I think they're saying they flow more than they actually do, which is causing everything to run a little bit lean. Like, look at this. This is from last year, and you can see this V map is way more acceptable than this one. This one is a mess. So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at the required fuel, and you can see this was on gasoline, this is on E85. So it doesn't make sense that they would have the exact same required fuel when E85 requires 30% more fuel, which is why this new tune's running so lean. So I think what I'm going to do is set the fuel pressure back to 17, or set it back to just a 2 bar flat, and then run them at 1720 cc, which is, you know, the interpolated value from 2200 cc at 3 bar. And I think that's going to run a lot better. I don't think this is right. I'm going to call these guys up, because it doesn't make sense that this is 2000 to 2.25. That would make it 2300, 2350 at like 3 bar, which is way out of spec of the injector. So I don't know, but I'm going to give that a try and see if it cleans up the VE map a little bit. All right, so I ended up setting my required fuel back to 1720 cc, and I set the fuel pressure back to 2 bar, and this is just running so much better. So I don't know, maybe those injectors didn't flow right, or maybe they didn't do the flow testing right, because now if we look at our VE table, you can see this looks a lot better. You can see there's a pretty big jump from 100 to 140 kPa, but you can see down here looks a lot better. I think there's such big jumps because it's going from 600 RPM steps and 40 kPa steps, but the air fuel ratios are looking pretty good. If we do a 3D view, you can see everything looks pretty smooth. So I'm pretty happy with how those turned out. And then we can see our AFR table. I got this set up pretty well. So pretty much everything out of boost, I'm running 14.7, 14.4. This is pretty rich for E85, to be honest, but I'm trying to do everything on the safe side. So I'm running about 12.0 air fuel ratio in boost and everything. I'm probably gonna lean out the top a little bit to 12.0. I don't really think it needs to run that rich at 11.5. So everything's running really good. Really happy with the tune. And then if we pop into here, we can take a look at one of our logs from earlier. Let's take a look at this is a 3rd gear pull. So here you can see we started at about 4,000 RPM, 3,900, and we have RPM is white, manifold absolute pressure is red, AFR is green, oil pressure is yellow. And we can see we're making 7 psi by about 4,500 RPM. And we can also see our oil pressure is solid. It's holding at like 67, 70 psi. And we can see our air fuel ratio is holding at a steady, 12.0, 11.8, and that thing's looking really good. So logs are looking really good. This is a pull to 6,500, I believe, 6,200. I think this log I was having issues with the boost cut, but if we open up a more recent one, here's just the end of a 3rd gear pull from 6,000, 62, 65, so to about 65, and we can see that oil pressures are looking really good, holding steady at like 65, 70 PSI right there. So I'm really happy with how the bass tunes run. It's only like a 10, 12 PSI bass tune. So like I said, I'm gonna try and get more footage of me actually driving the car. I gotta figure out a way to, you know, mount the camera. So until next video. 450 miles on the engine. I did another compression test. I got 190, 190, 190, 195, 190. So they're really starting to come together, like even out basically. And I assume that's because of the break-in. So at this point, I think the break-in's pretty complete, and I am so happy with how this engine's breaking in. I looked in the cylinders, the pistons look great, no signs of detonation, nothing. This thing's running fantastic. So we're gonna keep working on it. I wanna add in an external sensor harness. I wanna add like exhaust, back pressure, pre-intercooler IAT, fuel pressure, like a whole bunch of other sensors. So I'm gonna EGT. So I'm gonna start maybe putting that together. I wanna schedule a dyno in 2 weeks, and I wanna dyno this thing on 1 bar. I'm running around 7 to 12 PSI right now. It does creep up a little bit, and only 7,000 RPM, and man, does this thing rip. So gonna do an oil change tomorrow, 450 mile oil change. Make sure there's no bearing material in the oil. I don't think there's gonna be any material. Maybe some silver material, like ring material or cylinder wall material, or cam material from the cams breaking in, since they are new, which isn't a problem at all as long as there's no bronze or copper colored metal. So that's it for now, and until next video, guys. Car's running really good. Got all the fueling issues sorted out, and all the fuel fully tuned. Basically, I went back to 1720 cc at 2 bar. I don't think the spec sheet that injector rehab company sent me was right. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, yeah, I got the fuel all fully tuned. AFR map's all good. And I got her tuned for like 710 PSI right now to 6,500, 7,000 RPMs. So I'm trying to figure out a better way to record in car. I might order like a cheap like GoPro knockoff or something. Or maybe just a real GoPro or something, but I'm gonna figure that out before I post more in-car videos. So unfortunately, you guys are gonna have to wait a little bit longer, but the car's running great, and we got 400 miles on it, and everything's looking superb.